One hook and setup. The text came on a Tuesday afternoon. 6 plain words lit up her phone like a punch to the gut. You're not invited to the wedding. It wasn't from a distant cousin or an old friend. No, it was from her son. Her only son. The boy she raised through scraped knees and broken hearts. The boy she sacrificed sleep, money, and her own dreams for. Now, with one message, she was erased. Not with anger, not with shouting, just silence and exclusion. Like she didn't matter. But here's the irony. Families often believe the one who stays quiet is dispensable. The one who doesn't complain, the one who gives endlessly, is easy to overlook. That's exactly what happened here. They believed she was a shadow, a background character, a placeholder. So, instead of fighting, she did something unexpected. She packed a small suitcase, booked a last-minute vacation, and disappeared. No explanations, no guilt trips, just gone. And while the family danced, smiled, and planned a grand wedding without her, they didn't realize what they were removing wasn't just Mom. It was the invisible thread holding every moving piece together. But let's rewind for a second, because you might be wondering, who does that? What kind of mother just vanishes when her child cuts her out? To answer that, you have to understand her story. She wasn't always the forgotten woman. She wasn't always the one people dismissed. Once upon a time, she was the rock of her community, the go-to person, the backbone of her family. She had strength. She had presence. She had fire. But life has a way of wearing people down. Years of quiet sacrifices, of putting everyone else first, had buried her identity under the weight of responsibility. By the time her son was old enough to marry, she looked like just another ordinary woman fading into the background. That's the setup people missed, and that's where the story takes its sharpest turn. Because sometimes it's not the loudest person in the room who holds the power. Sometimes it's the silent one, the one no one counts, who has the ability to bring it all crashing down. And when she walked away, that's exactly what happened. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story about a wedding invitation. It's a story about power, resilience, and the unseen anchors in families. Welcome, story lovers. Tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. 2. Background are past struggles. She wasn't born invisible. That came later. As a child, she had big dreams. She wasn't the type to sit quietly in the back of the class. No. She was the one who raised her hand, who had the answers, who believed she could do something great. Teachers used to tell her parents, "This one will go far." And for a while, it seemed true. She wasn't rich, not by any stretch. But she had ambition that outshined the patched-up shoes on her feet. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, someone who could light sparks in kids the way her favorite teacher lit one in her. Education was her ticket out of struggle. That was her plan, but life has a way of rewriting plans without permission. Her family didn't have much, and what little they had went to the essentials: rent, food, and just enough left for bus fare. College wasn't on the horizon, not because she wasn't smart enough, but because survival was louder than ambition. Still, she didn't complain. She found joy in small victories: a borrowed book, a part-time job that put a few dollars in her pocket, evenings spent scribbling poems in the margins of old notebooks. Then came marriage. Like so many young women, she believed marriage would be her rescue, her new beginning. She thought she had found someone steady, someone who wanted to build a life as much as she did. At first it was good. The kind of good that makes you ignore the cracks in the walls because you're just grateful to have a roof. But those cracks widened fast. Her husband wasn't cruel, but he wasn't committed either. He wanted comfort without responsibility, freedom without sacrifice. Bills stacked up, fights followed, and little by little, she carried more weight than she signed up for. And yet, she stayed. Because leaving felt impossible when you had a child depending on you. Then came the moment that shattered everything. Her son, her only son, got sick. The kind of sick that racks up medical bills faster than you can keep track of. Hospital stays, long nights in emergency rooms, prescriptions that cost more than rent. She begged, borrowed, and worked herself raw just to keep up. And when she needed her husband most, he left. Just like that. One night, After another fight about money, he said the words she'll never forget. "I didn't sign up for this," and then he was gone. No goodbye kiss to his son, no apology. Just absence. She could have collapsed right there. But she didn't, because mothers don't collapse, they adapt. She found 2 jobs, one during the day, one at night. She became a waitress, then a cashier, then a cleaner, whatever kept the lights on and the fridge humming. There were nights when dinner was buttered toast and tap water, but her son never went to bed hungry. That was her silent victory. Her dreams, they went on a dusty shelf. The teaching degree she once hoped for was replaced by bills, receipts, and overdue notices. She stopped writing poetry. She stopped raising her hand. She stopped thinking about herself at all. But here's the thing. While everyone else saw an ordinary woman doing ordinary things, she was building extraordinary resilience. She learned how to stretch $20 across a week, how to repair clothes with a needle and thread when new ones weren't an option, how to fix things with tape and determination. She became the person who could juggle a sick child, 2 jobs and a stack of unpaid bills without breaking. The kind of woman who quietly carried a family on her back without asking for applause. There were nights when exhaustion hit so hard that she cried silently on the kitchen floor after her son went to bed. Not because she was weak, but because she couldn't let him see her break. To him, she had to be unshakable. She never complained, not once. And that silence was both her strength and her curse. Because here's the truth. When you always show up, when you never ask for anything in return, people start to believe you don't need anything. They start to assume your sacrifices are easy. They forget you're human. Her son grew up never fully seeing the storm she shielded him from. To him, it looked like she managed, like she always figured it out. He didn't see the nights she skipped meals so he could eat, or the days she wore the same shoes until the soles gave out. And maybe that's what hurt the most, not the struggle itself, but the invisibility of it. The way her love looked so seamless, it turned invisible. By the time he was old enough to marry, she wasn't the shining dreamer anymore. She was the background figure, the one who got things done, the one who never needed thanks. The mom who everyone assumed would always be there, quietly orbiting around their joy until she wasn't, because even the strongest anchors, when unappreciated long enough, eventually let go. And when she did, that's when everything began to unravel. Her life had been one long stretch of quiet survival. Work, bills, sacrifice. That was the rhythm. She wasn't chasing dreams anymore. She was simply keeping things from falling apart. But life has a way of handing you crossroads when you least expect it. The first crack in her steady rhythm came on an ordinary evening. She was cleaning up after one of her side jobs. Yes, even after all those years, she still juggled extra work. This time it was housekeeping for a small hotel by the waterfront. Her son was grown, healthy, and preparing for his wedding. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt replaced. It wasn't just the wedding text that hurt. It was everything leading up to it. The way her son's fiancé politely but firmly made it clear she wasn't part of the vision for their new life. The way relatives who once relied on her now treated her like background noise. The way the very people she had sacrificed for acted as though she were dispensable. She swallowed it all quietly. Until one night, while tidying up the hotel lounge, she noticed something out of place. A couple had left their bag on a chair, and sticking out was a folder labeled Property Development Proposal. Normally, she would have ignored it. But the logo on the corner made her pause. It belonged to the same investment group that was sponsoring her son's wedding. Curiosity tugged at her. She told herself she'd just peek, make sure it wasn't something personal left behind. But when she glanced at the papers, the words made her blood run cold. Zoning permits, loan applications, risk assessments, and then, in bold type at the bottom, projected financial risk shifted to community residents. It didn't take a business degree to understand what that meant. The company was planning a massive real estate project, one that would line their pockets while drowning working-class families in debt and rent hikes. Families just like hers. For a moment, she froze. It wasn't her problem, was it? She was just the cleaner. Just the invisible woman. But then another thought cut in like a knife. This was the very company her son's fiance's family was tied to. The ones who made her feel so unwanted. The ones smiling while others paid the price. That night, she took the folder home. Not to steal, but to copy down what she saw. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she once balanced overdue bills, and began piecing things together. It was almost funny. Years of stretching pennies had turned her into a natural accountant. She could spot numbers that didn't add up from a mile away, and these numbers? They screamed corruption. The next day, she confided in the only person who still treated her like she mattered, her neighbor, an older woman named Evelyn. Evelyn wasn't wealthy, but she was wise. She listened quietly as the story spilled out. When it was done, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Maybe this is the fight you were meant for. Maybe being invisible was the perfect disguise all along." It was the first time in years. Someone had suggested she wasn't just surviving, that maybe she had a role to play in something bigger. But taking action came with risk. If she exposed the company, she'd be going up against people with money, lawyers, and connections. And if her son's fiance's family was involved, she risked pushing him further away. The very child she had sacrificed everything for might see her as a saboteur. Still, silence had never protected her before. Why start now? She began to dig deeper. Using the notes she copied, she researched late into the night on an old laptop. Public records, zoning hearings, property maps. Piece by piece, a pattern emerged. The company was deliberately inflating costs, hiding debts, and planning to offload the fallout on low-income homeowners. Her chest tightened as she realized this wasn't just numbers on a page. It was people's lives. Families would lose homes. Communities would collapse, and in that moment, something shifted inside her. For years, she had been told, directly and indirectly, that she didn't matter, that her role was small. But here was proof. She could see what others couldn't. She understood what others ignored. She had power. Of course, power invites enemies. Word got around the hotel that she had been asking questions. A junior manager cornered her one evening, smirking as he said, "Careful what you snoop into. Some things aren't meant for your kind to worry about." The word stung. Not just the arrogance, but the reminder of how easily people dismissed her. That night, instead of backing down, she wrote everything she had discovered on a notepad. Numbers, names, dates, evidence. She kept the pad hidden under her mattress like contraband, and just when she was building courage to take her findings to someone who could help, life threw her another blow. Her son. He called, not to apologize for the cruel text, not to check in, but to ask for money. Wedding expenses had ballooned, and though he had barely spoken to her in months, he expected her to contribute. "Just a little something," he said, as if she hadn't already given him everything she had for decades. It was the knife twist she didn't see coming. But it also clarified something. If she gave him money, it would go straight into the pockets of the same people she was uncovering. She'd be funding the very corruption destroying families like hers. For the first time in her life, she said no. And it felt like both betrayal and liberation. Her decision put her in direct conflict not just with the company, but with her own flesh and blood. Her son's fiancé heard about her interference and spread whispers that she was bitter, jealous, trying to sabotage the wedding. Relatives believed it because it was easier than facing the truth. Now she wasn't just excluded, she was branded as toxic. But here's the thing about being pushed into a corner. You either break or you fight. And for once, she chose to fight. She drafted an anonymous email attaching her notes and sent it to a local journalist known for exposing corporate scandals. She hit send with trembling hands, half expecting nothing to come of it. But what followed would ignite a firestorm, because the woman they dismissed as invisible had just set the stage for a reckoning. This was the moment everything began to rise. Her courage, their suspicion, and the stakes for everyone involved. She had crossed the line from survival to resistance, and the wedding that had excluded her, it was about to become ground zero for a collapse no one saw coming. The wedding was supposed to be perfect. Rows of ivory roses lined the aisle. A string quartet hummed soft melodies. Guests sipped champagne and whispered about how elegant it all looked. It was the kind of event that screamed money, status, control. The kind where appearances mattered more than truth. And she wasn't supposed to be there. But she was. Quiet at first, like a shadow slipping in through the side doors. No grand entrance, no announcement. Just presence. People noticed her only when it was too late. A couple of relatives frowned. The bride's family exchanged sharp glances, and her son, the same one who sent the text, looked like he'd seen a ghost. But she didn't flinch. She walked with the steady calm of someone who knew something nobody else did, because she had a secret. A folder tucked neatly in her bag. The ceremony began, vows recited, cameras flashing. Every eye fixed on the beautiful couple, every smile rehearsed for photographs. And then came the reception, a glittering hall full of speeches and toasts. The bride's father, a man with deep pockets and deeper arrogance, took the microphone first. He boasted about family, about legacy, about building a brighter future for the community. Applause erupted. That's when she rose. At first, no one paid attention. She was just the mother in the back, the one excluded, dismissed, practically erased from the script. A couple of guests whispered, "What is she doing here?" She stepped forward anyway, heart pounding but eyes steady. She asked for the microphone. A waiter tried to stop her. The bride's father laughed under his breath. Her son shook his head, embarrassed, and then came the words that changed everything. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "Before we celebrate legacies, perhaps we should talk about lies." The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. A few people chuckled nervously, assuming she was bitter, maybe even unstable. The bride's family looked ready to escort her out. But then she opened the folder. Page after page of numbers, permits, and falsified documents spilled out across the table in front of the head family members. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This," she said, tapping the pages, "is your missing money. The debts you've hidden, the projects you've misrepresented, the scheme you've built on the backs of families who don't even know you're about to crush them." The bride's father turned red. "This is outrageous. Who even let you?" But she cut him off, calmly. "And before you dismiss me, I should mention copies of this evidence are already in the hands of the local paper and the district attorney's office. By tomorrow, the community will know exactly who's been bleeding them dry." Gasps filled the hall. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Even the bride's smile faltered. Her son stared at her, torn between disbelief and a dawning realization. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at just Mom. He was looking at the woman who had carried him through sickness, through poverty, through every storm, and who was now strong enough to face down a family with power and money. The backlash came. Fast. She's lying. She's jealous. She's trying to ruin this wedding. But she didn't need to defend herself. The documents spoke louder than any insult. Dates, signatures, numbers. They told the story of fraud, exploitation, and greed. And everyone in that hall could see it. Her humiliation, her exclusion, had just flipped into their exposure. In that moment, the roles reversed completely. The bride's family, once glowing with authority, now scrambled to silence whispers among the guests. The son, once ashamed of his mother, now sat frozen, realizing the truth. She wasn't the weak link. She was the anchor, the protector, the one with the courage to face what no one else dared to. And she didn't gloat, didn't scream, didn't demand applause. She simply handed the microphone back, gathered her folder, and said with quiet finality, "I'll let the evidence speak. I'm done being invisible." Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind a hall full of stunned silence. That was the day the uninvited mother became the most powerful person in the room. Not through wealth, not through status, but through truth. And the perfect wedding? It didn't collapse in the flowers or the champagne. It collapsed in the one place no one expected, under the weight of her courage. Dear audience, if you're feeling the goosebumps, don't forget to give this story a like. It really helps more people discover stories like this. The silence of that boardroom followed Ruth home that night, but not as a burden, this time as freedom. For years, her world had been built on survival, on waiting for someone else to notice her worth. But after she placed that napkin on the polished mahogany table, she realized something life-changing. She no longer needed validation from people who dismissed her. She had validated herself. The company panicked, of course. Overnight, the CFO resigned. The CEO gave press statements filled with excuses. Investigations were launched, reputations were shredded, and for once, the janitor had the upper hand. They begged Ruth to stay. They dangled a six-figure salary, an office with glass walls, a title that came with respect she had long been denied. But Ruth didn't pause for even a second. She smiled politely and said, "No, thank you," because she finally understood. Her value was never tied to their approval. Instead, she took the whistleblower settlement money and invested it into something she had dreamed of quietly for years, her own forensic consulting firm. Not some shiny tower office with marble floors, but a modest space in a small downtown building. White walls, a second-hand desk, and a door with her name on it. Ruth Carter, Forensic Accounting Solutions. Her first clients weren't corporations. They were women like her, small business owners who had been cheated by partners, single mothers trying to navigate confusing financial paperwork, nonprofits desperate to track every donated dollar. She charged less than market rates, not because she doubted her worth, but because she remembered what it was like to count pennies at the grocery store. But word travels fast when someone is both brilliant and honest. Soon, Fortune 500 companies came knocking. At first, Ruth hesitated. These were the same kinds of people who once looked through her as if she didn't exist. But then she realized she wasn't going back as their employee. She was going back as their equal, the woman they had to pay and respect if they wanted to survive. And this time, they did listen. Her son watched the transformation with wide eyes. Once he had seen his mother collapse at the kitchen table, exhausted from double shifts. Once he had heard her cry quietly at night, thinking he was asleep. But now, he saw her walk tall, making choices not out of desperation but from strength. He thrived, too. School became easier when he wasn't weighed down by fear of eviction notices or empty cupboards. His mother's courage lit something inside him. Top of his class, captain of his debate team, already dreaming of law school. When people asked where his fire came from, he just pointed to her. "Everything I am," he'd say, "is because she refused to give up." But Ruth's redemption wasn't just financial, it was spiritual, emotional, and deeply personal. She no longer saw herself as invisible. She no longer shrank when people in suits entered the room. In fact, one of her favorite quiet victories came months later at a charity gala. She entered the hall in a simple black dress, nothing flashy, just her. The CEO who once smirked at her while she held a mop froze mid-sentence when he saw her. For the first time, he looked small. Ruth didn't need revenge. She already had victory. Her consulting firm grew, but she never forgot the women who were still trapped in cycles of invisibility and struggle. So she launched a scholarship program for single mothers studying accounting. She mentored them personally, teaching not only numbers but resilience, the kind you can't learn from textbooks. She told them, "Don't wait for someone to open the door. Build your own." And they listened, because Ruth wasn't just another success story. She was proof that survival could become triumph. Today, Ruth's life is unrecognizable from those janitor years. She travels, not because she's running from shame, but because she wants to see the world she once thought was closed off to her. She eats without checking her wallet first. She sleeps without fear of bills piling up. But the most powerful change isn't in her bank account. It's in her spirit. When she walks into a room now, people don't see the cleaner or the background woman. They see a leader, a survivor, a woman who turned dust into diamonds. Looking back, Ruth often reflects on that night in the boardroom, the moment she laid down the napkin covered in numbers. It wasn't just math scribbled in ink. It was years of sacrifice, grit, and hidden brilliance bursting into the light. That napkin wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. And when they saw it, the powerful were forced to face themselves. And so, the janitor became a giant. Not because she shouted the loudest, but because she chose not to stay silent anymore. Her story now inspires thousands, not because it was easy, but because it was real. So the next time you feel overlooked, dismissed, or invisible, think of Ruth. Remember that even in the darkest corners of life, you are still holding something powerful, your worth. It only takes one moment of courage to let the world see it. Thanks for watching, story lovers. If this story touched you, drop a in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching from? Let's see how far Ruth's story can travel. They once dismissed Ruth as just a janitor. But what they didn't realize was that she had been carrying more than a mop all those years. She was carrying strength, dignity, and an unshakable will to survive. She wasn't simply wiping down floors. She was holding a family together. She was cleaning up after life's betrayals. She was sweeping away her own doubts piece by piece, until courage finally stood in their place. Ruth's story teaches us something timeless. Greatness doesn't always wear a suit or sit behind a mahogany desk. Sometimes it wears worn shoes, tired eyes, and a quiet smile. And yet, when the right moment comes, it rises. So here's the question for you. Dear listener, how many people do we overlook every single day? The grocery clerk who dreams of becoming a writer, the bus driver who once studied engineering, the neighbor who gave up her career to raise her children. How many Ruths walk among us, unseen? Until their moment finally arrives, Ruth didn't need applause. She didn't need revenge. What she wanted was peace, respect, and the chance to build a life on her own terms, and she found it. But life had one more surprise waiting for her. Months after her firm began thriving, Ruth received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from a client or a company. It was from a university. They wanted to honor her with an award for integrity in business and invite her to deliver a keynote address to graduating students. The woman who once scrubbed their hallways at night was now standing on their stage in daylight, teaching the next generation about courage, truth, and resilience. As she walked off that stage, the applause was deafening. But Ruth just smiled. Because applause wasn't her goal, it was never her goal. Her goal was survival, then dignity, and finally legacy. So the next time you see someone invisible, remember Ruth. The mop doesn't define them. Their title doesn't define them. Their paycheck doesn't define them. What defines them is their courage to keep going, their strength to rise again, and their quiet refusal to stay silent forever. Because sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one who saves it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.